Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the third part of Tales from the Stash, the big sting, of course. Last two videos I shouldn't say compared, I'll be doing that this time around, but I talked about the Hasegawa and Kinetic FA-18 Hornet kits, as you see right here. These are the ones I talked about. And I did a close comparison between the two. I figured I got some downtime before I had to work, so I'll discuss it a little bit. So, without further ado, let's talk about it. Anyway, so I got time to compare between both kits. As you already know, you got the Hasegawa Hornet, which came out early in the mid-90s, and then the Kinetic kit, which actually came out a couple of years back. So, let's get down to it. Sorry for apologizing to myself. I'm just trying to get everything going. So, I got a look at both describing the plastic and the detail and stuff. Detail, it's kind of a tie between both kits. In the Hasegawa might seem a little deceptive at first, but once you get paint on and stuff, it'll look better as it goes. As for the Kinetic has really come a long way since, as I said before, since their F-16 kits. And this time around, the detail is actually more sharp. It's more to it. Some of the areas look busy if they're not very accurate. Same thing with the Hasegawa. And I have to admit, it's really promising. I mean, both of them are just very promising. And same thing with the scribing on both kits. The Hasegawa, the scribing's a little more delicate, and even though it's well done, it's a little more delicate and petite. So when you lay down paint and stuff, be wary. I mean, I do relatively well. I've used primer coats and stuff with the Hasegawa kit, but still, be a little wary because you can actually remove it if you apply the paint too heavy or if you do a little bit too much of sanding and filling. But I'll talk about it a little later. The Kinetic kit, scribing's a little heavier, but it's still restrained, and you can get away with a primer coat. You can put a couple coats of paint on. Looks very good. And in my case, since I use a primer, which is necessary, you don't have to if you don't want to. But still, no, I'm thinking Hasegawa. The Kinetic, it's well done. It's equally as good, even though it's just a touch heavier. Engineering, they're two different beasts. The Hasegawa was intended the way it was intended. The Kinetic is a little more interesting because due to the fact that it's got a one-piece lower fuselage, it looks a little bit more simple to put together. Speaking of assembly, the Hasegawa, like I said in the last video, I built 4 of them. So it's far more complex as compared to the Kinetic in a different way. But once you get the hang of it, it gets easier and easier each time you pick up the Hasegawa kit. Let's see what else here. I mentioned detail. Research. Both of them got the research done right. But you got to keep in mind, these are 2 different kits from 2 different eras. You got to keep that in mind. The Hornet represented at that point in time in the early mid-90s before it started getting the upgrades like it did now. The Kinetic, definitely up to date. So you don't need aftermarket for that. Although they're probably going to make some more aftermarket once people get more comfortable with it. Let's see, what else is there? Fit and assembly. I don't know much about the Kinetic kit. I will tell you right off the bat, I actually had to look up a few videos and articles about the Kinetic kit and how it assembled. It seems a little dicey because it's got a lot more options in the kit. So and since it's being a Kinetic kit, and Kinetic's a little known for being a little rougher in the assembly, like fit and in the assembly, a little rough. It doesn't require much. It's not like dealing with a limited run kit, but it does have its hang-ups. So be wary with it. And if you're familiar with Kinetic, take your time, figure out where the trouble spots are, fix them accordingly. Hasegawa, the fit's very good. Maybe you just got a little bit of seam work if you do everything right. So, and Hasegawa kits do fall together. Not quite as good as Tamiya, but they do fall together relatively well. So, I'm gonna give it to Hasegawa on this one. Instructions. We'll go to the instructions here. Hasegawa, hands down. The reason why I say this is because even though the Kinetic kit, the instructions have improved greatly, they're still got errors. So, which means double check, triple check everything. If you got to deviate from the instructions. Make sure you know what goes where. It shouldn't be too hard. If you're not sure, check the Hasegawa kit and see how similar it is. That's what I did. That's what I would do. I shouldn't say what I did. That's what I would do. Um, just be wary. Like I said, the options might cause more trouble than it's worth. Trouble spots, according to some of the research I've done, intakes, landing gear, the nose section. Otherwise, everything else seems to fit fine. The intakes are probably going to require a little bit of work just to get them to fit semi-decent. Of course, putty sanding is going to be involved, but that's expected. The one thing I've learned about the hobby is no kit is perfect. None of them. Doesn't matter what you build. It may be perfect to one person's eye, but another person might find it to be a nightmare. The Hasegawa fit, like I said. What am I talking about? Oh yeah, that's where I last. The instructions. Why did I go back to the fit? I don't know. Hasegawa's instructions, they're clear, they're concise, and it shows where everything goes. Even though they're multilingual, they're still easy to follow. I mean, of course, both instructions provide color callouts. Kinetic provides MIG, and if I remember correctly, I don't know if they still do it. I didn't really go through the instructions like I usually do. I usually do a quick run through. Like I said before, I haven't built this yet, and I will one of these days, eventually, once my son's grown up. Usually, in Kinetic's case, they call for MIG paints. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, they call for the MIG paints, but if you have the proper research, you can go cross-reference their paints. Same thing with Hasegawa. They go with GSI Creus, and for some of us older builders, it's Gun Sangyo. Fortunately, they have the colors that are similar to, because of they offer the federal standard color charts, what they're supposed to be. So some cross-referencing will come into order, especially if you use light color, testers, Vallejo. Kinetic seems to be big on the MIG paints with their instructions. They used to go through Vallejo, testers, GSI Creos, and a couple others, and it's relatively easy to cross-reference. But definitely, instructions go to Hasegawa. Decals, this is kind of a mixed bag, but I'm going to have to give the nod to Kinetic on this one. Now, the Hasegawa kit decals are okay. They're usable. But I would avoid stenciling on the decal sheet because they seem off. Otherwise, everything, like the marking stuff, seem okay. Although I would double check your references on the colors, especially if you don't feel comfortable with them. So I would recommend getting aftermarket for the Hasegawa kit. Fortunately, there's plenty available. The Kinetic, on the other hand, they're well printed. I've heard that their decals are very good. They were researched by Cross Delta, and they were also researched by printed by Cartograph. So they're going to be very good decals. And depending on which boxing you get from the Kinetic, like if you get their initial C kit, or particularly the FA18AB or the upcoming releases, their decals are still very well done. If the problem with their decals is they represent a certain part. They don't represent, back in the older days when the Hornet first entered service, it doesn't represent the Desert Storm. It doesn't represent Allied Force or anything. But in this boxing, the A and the B boxing, they do provide for Canada, Australia, and Spain. So that's not a bad trade-off. You can always use the stenciling if you don't feel like using those decals. And like I said, I've heard good things about the Kinetic. So Kinetic gets a nod on this one. But if you don't want to use you don't want to use the decals in the box, once again, aftermarket to the rescue. Price. I'm gonna have to give the nod to Kinetic because which will lead to this reason why. It's cheaper, but there seems to be more for it. Whereas the Hasegawa kit, Hasegawa's biggest flaw, until recently, was always, they always did each boxing, get each specific variant to get, but it kind of puts a strain financially, because even though you're getting a specific variant, you want to build another variant, you're going to have to have to do kit bashing, get some aftermarket stuff, or even just scrounge from another kit, especially if you mess up a part, because they only do each release like A, B, C, D. Well, even though most recently they started giving you the option of, with this Hornet kit, A or C, especially with the newer decal sheet that they put with it. Which leads me to this part, value, or value for the money. Kinetic wins this hands down. Reason for it, Hasegawa, lack of ordnance. Even though they got 3 pods that, like you said in the last video, they got 3 pods. You got the flare, got a tracker pod, and I think a camera pod. And they have the proper mounts for where they go. You have 3 fuel tanks. But they don't have weapons. Once again, we know what the Hornet can carry, but it would have been nice if Hasegawa at least gave basic ordnance, just bare minimum. That would have been nice. And the reason why I say the Kinetic hands down is because the research they've done, the options they give. I mean, they give tons of options, and the ordnance provided. It's generic, but you'd still use it. Even if you get Kinetic's initial FA-18C release, you still get more ordnance. In that case, they give specific ones. For example, they give you Sparrow missiles, they give you AGM-88 Horn missiles, and of course the F-16 weapons sprue, 2 of them. Do the same thing with the A and the B, but the A and the B kit doesn't provide the Sparrows or even the Horn missiles. But still, you still got a laser guided bomb, you still got Sidewinders, you still got AMRAAMs, you still got JDAM. You even got a cluster bomb. So it's not a bad trade-off. Of course, you're going to have to go scrounging parts because the Hornet can carry a wide variety, and what if you don't want to use them? It's not a problem. Which leads me to the other thing, like I said, for the value. Hasegawa Hornet, it does have a lot of detail, but it only provides so much in terms of options. It does have 2 different kinds of afterburner cans, which is pretty cool. But it doesn't provide full intake trunking like the Kinetic kit does. But if you're just building them and putting them on a shelf, that's really a non-issue. The Kinetic, on the other hand, depending on what boxing you get, for example, the C kit as is, it's the FA-18C. But if you get the 2-seater, there's extra parts provided for A, B, C, and D, and you can mix and match parts if you want to. No problems about it. You even got parts for the ATARS version, which Kinetic is apparently releasing in a future release. It also provides refueling probe, be displayed open or closed. Of course, 2-seater. It also provides parts, other little options. Speed brake, of course. Folding wings. That's an interesting one. Hasegawa does have provisions for folding wings, but that's if you get a special edition. And like I said, depending on which boxing you get from Kinetic, you probably get much more than you expect. So, and if you find, and if you're very good at like figuring out how to put things together without instructions, the Kinetic is definitely a hands down. As I said before, both of them varies down to value. Now, overall, which one is the better kit? I don't know. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, as for as what I do, I will tell you this. Even though the Hasegawa kit does provide photo etch and white metal, it is kind of a multimedia, and I would recommend keep it away from beginners at the moment. Same thing with the Kinetic. Until they get a few kits under the belt, these really aren't for the beginner yet, especially with the parts they provide. Like I said, Kinetic has photo etch parts, spruce it up a little bit. Hasegawa, you have no choice but to use certain parts, like the white metal landing gear and the photo etch for parts of the cockpit and for the heads-up display. Same thing with Kinetic, but Kinetic doesn't have the white metal. So these really aren't for the beginner, as I point to the floor. But overall, I'm, like I said before, the Hasegawa, and I shouldn't say like I said before. Sorry. Uh, don't mind me, I'm still waking up. But which one is better? It depends. It really depends. Now, if most people are going to stick with the Hasegawa kit, even though the options aren't as numerous as the Kinetic, it's still a good starting point. And also, they have plenty of aftermarket stuff available. Like if you want to replace the centerline pylon, you want to fold the wings, you want to replace the burner cans, the cockpit. In both of their case, you don't really need to do much to them. An aftermarket seat, maybe a couple of photo etch parts just to spruce it up a little bit. The Kinetic is still too new for it to have any to have any photo etch aftermarket, but I'm sure Edward's making a photo etch set for it, and I'm sure Aries and other companies are probably going to add some more aftermarket stuff. And you probably could use the aftermarket stuff from the Hasegawa onto the Kinetic if you do some modification, you do a little bit of trimming and filling. However, with the Connecticut, it's different. It's a little more difficult in a different way because the engineering's a little rough. So like I said before, there's trouble spots. You just get the tools out you need to make sure everything goes together as flawless or least hassle as possible. Yes, the Hasegawa falls together, but it's got its hang-ups too. So, in terms of just which one's better kit, neither one, it's up to you. In the terms of bang for the buck, the Connecticut does win, and it may not unseat the Hasegawa kit, but it's definitely a cheaper and better alternative of the two. It's, like I said, the Connecticut, it's got its issues, but every kit does. But it's nice to have another alternative besides Hasegawa and Hobby Boss. We'll not get into the Hobby Boss kit. The reason why I excluded that is because it's really just a copy of the Hasegawa, just not as good. It's not a complete 100% knockoff of the Hasegawa, but it's similar in some aspects. But overall, this is ultimately up to you. And the Connecticut, I would get it because you get more value for the money. Especially you can't find the Hasegawa kit. And I mean, let's face it, the Hasegawa kit's not cheap. I mean, granted, the Connecticut's not going to be cheap either. But at least you get more out of it. So ultimately, it's up to you. So I got to go to work and get ready to get going. So happy modeling. Take it easy, guys. And hopefully I'll give you another update on my workbench. So talk to you guys soon. Enjoy your day.